The cold desert wind howled like a crying wolf that night. The moon hid behind thick black clouds, and the sand beneath her bare feet felt like tiny needles. Aaliya ran, her breath broken, her heart racing. Behind her, she could hear the thunder of hoofs, for riders closing in fast, their torches lighting the dark night like small, angry suns. Her white scarf fluttered behind her like a ghost trying to pull her back. The heavy gold necklace around her neck felt like chains now, not ornaments. She wasn't running away from enemies. No, the real enemy was the fate written for her, a fate she never chose. Tonight was supposed to be her wedding night. Aaliya had been promised since she was 14 to Malik Khan, the leader of the most powerful tribe in the valley, a man twice her age, feared by many, respected by all. It was a deal made by her father to protect their family's name, their land, and their pride. But pride was a cruel thing. It demanded her heart, her freedom, her life, because Aaliya's heart never belonged to Malik Khan. It belonged to someone else, someone who should never have touched her hand or whispered her name. The riders shouted behind her, calling her a traitor, a disgrace. She could almost feel Malik Khan's cold eyes on her back, promising punishment. Her legs burned, her throat dry like the desert, but she kept running. Ahead of her, past the hills, past the river that cut the valley in two, he was waiting, the man she loved, the man she could never have. And as the first drop of rain touched her cheek, mixing with her tears, she asked herself one question over and over. Would love be enough to rewrite destiny? Because if it wasn't, she would lose everything, her family, her freedom, and the man who had stolen her heart. The desert was not just a place, it was alive. It breathed with the wind, it whispered secrets through the dunes, and it watched everything with silent, golden eyes. This was the Valley of No Mercy, a land where promises were stronger than love, where family honor mattered more than a woman's heart. A place ruled by powerful tribes, their flags flying high in the hot wind, each one carrying the weight of blood, war, and betrayal. In this world lived Aaliya, the only daughter of Wazir Khan, a respected tribal leader. From the outside, her life seemed like a dream. She lived in a grand mud palace with soft carpets under her feet and servants at her call, but inside, Aaliya carried wounds no one could see. Her mother had died when she was 10, taken by a fever that burned her body and left Aaliya's world cold. Since then, she learned early that softness was dangerous, that smiling too much made people think you were weak. She kept her pain locked, deep inside, behind her dark eyes that rarely looked up, and a voice that stayed quiet at every family gathering. But when no one was watching, she would sit by the window of her room, tracing the scar on her left wrist, a thin, almost invisible line that only she knew was there, a reminder of the night she almost ended her own story when she was promised to Malik Khan. Malik Khan, a name that made even grown men lower their eyes. A leader feared not only for his sword but for his mind. Ruthless, powerful, and twice Aaliya's age, he controlled the eastern valleys with an iron fist. It was said he had never smiled in his life. When Aaliya's father shook hands with him and sealed her fate, she didn't cry. She smiled the way a soldier smiles when they know the war is lost. But not everything in her world was dark. There was also Zion, a man from a rival tribe, younger, reckless, with a heart that refused to bow to rules. Aaliya had met him by accident 2 years ago when her horse ran loose, and he had caught her reins just in time to stop her fall. Their eyes had met, and something inside her shifted forever. Zion lived beyond the river in the outlaw territories, where no tribe controlled the land. He was a man shaped by the wild sunburned skin, sand-colored hair, and a smile that promised both trouble and freedom. He had his own scars, too, the loss of his family during a tribal war, the years spent hiding from those who wanted him dead. Their meetings had been stolen moments, whispers in the night, letters hidden in saddlebags, a glance across a crowded marketplace. Their love was forbidden, dangerous, impossible. And now, everything was about to collapse. The political tension in the valley was rising. Malik Khan had been gathering allies, preparing for a war no one wanted to speak about. Rumors spread like wildfire of betrayal, of spies, of secret plans to overthrow tribes who refused to bow. Wazir Khan had grown cold toward his daughter, seeing her only as a key to strengthen his alliances. He didn't notice the way her eyes changed when Zion's name was mentioned in the shadows. The desert around them seemed peaceful during the day. Golden sands, the smell of cumin and cardamom, floating from market tents, children playing with wooden swords, but beneath that beauty, danger crawled like a snake waiting to strike. And at the center of it all stood Aaliya, torn between duty and love, between the fate written for her and the future she wanted to carve with her own hands. A storm was coming, and Aaliya's heart was the match that could burn everything to the ground. The desert winds howled louder that night. It was the eve of Aaliya's engagement ceremony, a night meant to seal her destiny forever. In her father's grand courtyard, lanterns danced in the darkness, silk banners fluttered, and men in heavy robes laughed over sweet dates and bitter tea. Everyone celebrated the deal struck between two powerful tribes, but Aaliya's heart was a storm. Far away from the music, she stood by her window, her eyes locked on the horizon where the desert swallowed the sky. She knew Zion was out there somewhere, unaware of what fate had been written in ink and blood. And then it happened. A sudden shout broke the calm. A rider, breathless and covered in dust, galloped through the gates. His horse stumbled, foam at its mouth, and the man collapsed to the ground. The message he carried changed everything. Bandits had attacked a trade caravan on the eastern border, but this was no ordinary raid. It was a warning. The outlaws had left behind a flag, not just any flag, but the Black Falcon banner of Malik Khan's enemies. A trap had been set, and war was on the horizon. That night, Wazir Khan called for an emergency meeting of tribal elders. Voices rose, accusations flew like arrows, and the air grew heavy with fear. But in the middle of it all, Malik Khan remained silent, his cold eyes fixed on Aaliya from across the courtyard. Later that night, Aaliya's father summoned her to his private chamber. His face was harder than stone. "You will marry Malik Khan next month," he said quietly. "This is no longer a matter of choice. It is a matter of survival." Aaliya's lips trembled. She wanted to scream, to beg, but she knew it wouldn't change anything. She was not a daughter tonight. She was a political pawn. But the night still had one more twist. As Aaliya stepped out of her father's room, her maid slipped her a folded piece of cloth, a secret letter smuggled under the watchful eyes of guards. It was from Zion, 4 words written in haste, smudged with dirt: "Meet me at midnight." The weight of those words crushed her. If anyone saw her leave, it would mean death. But how could she ignore him? The clock struck midnight when Aaliya slipped through the back gate, her heart racing louder than her footsteps. She walked past sleeping guards, through silent alleyways, until she reached the old fig tree near the river, their secret meeting place. Zion was already there, his face hidden under a dark scarf. His eyes softened when he saw her, but there was urgency in his voice. "They've planned this attack," he said. "Malik Khan wants war, and your father is walking into a trap." Aaliya's breath caught. "How do you know?" "Because I was there," Zion replied. "I've been inside Malik Khan's camp. He plans to marry you not for peace, but to control your father's lands." Her world spun. Aaliya had always known her marriage was a business deal, but now she realized it was a cage designed to break her family, to make her a prisoner. Before she could speak, the sound of footsteps echoed in the darkness. They had been followed. A group of masked men stepped out from behind the Malik Khan spies, swords drawn, eyes cold. They had been waiting for this moment. One of them pointed at Aaliya. "Your betrayal ends here." Zion grabbed her hand. "Run." The night exploded into chaos. Steel clashing, shouts ringing, footsteps chasing them across the dry riverbed. The desert wind carried the sound far into the night, but no one in her father's palace heard the danger that had already begun. By sunrise, everything Aaliya knew would fall apart, and nothing would ever be the same again. The desert sun burned high in the sky, its golden rays merciless and unforgiving. Each grain of sand shimmered like fire beneath their feet. The journey had begun, and it was nothing like she imagined. Aaliya, once the beloved daughter of a noble family, now rode between strangers, her hands bound not by ropes, but by duty, betrayal, and a promise she never made. The men leading her across the vast wasteland were no friends. Among them was Kale, tall, quiet, and cold-eyed. His reputation stretched across villages like a shadow, a mercenary without loyalty, a man who fought for gold, not for honor. But there was something in his silence, something she couldn't yet understand. It was supposed to be simple. Aaliya would be delivered safely to the ruling tribe, married to the chief's son, a political deal sealed long ago. But everything changed the moment Kale's men intercepted her caravan. This wasn't just a kidnapping, it was a message. a war brewing beneath the sand. For days, Aaliya rode beside Kale's men, listening, observing. She heard whispers of a coming revolt, of secret deals, of betrayals that went back years. Even before she was promised to a man she barely knew. But it wasn't the threats outside that kept her awake at night. It was the growing questions inside. Why did Kale keep looking at her when he thought no one was watching? Why did he stop his men when they wanted to treat her like a prisoner? Their journey wasn't just across the desert. It was through layers of mistrust. Aaliya wasn't a damsel waiting to be saved. She challenged Kale at every step, refusing to be silent. Every night by the fire, their arguments flared about duty, freedom, honor, and choices that were never theirs to make. Kale called her naive. She called him heartless. But somewhere, in the sharpness of their words, something unexpected began to grow. The desert was not their only enemy. Bandits followed their trail, believing Aaliya's capture was worth a fortune. Kale's own men whispered behind his back, questioning why he risked everything for a woman promised to another. And then there was the hunter, a man named Rafik, once Kale's closest ally, now his deadliest enemy. He wanted Aaliya, not for politics, but for revenge. Every night they moved in silence, scanning the horizon, knowing Rafik's men could appear at any moment. The journey had become a dangerous game of survival, betrayal, and shifting loyalties. But it wasn't just Kale's enemies who carried secrets. One night, as the moon carved silver shadows over the dunes, Aaliya overheard something that froze her blood, a conversation between two of Kale's men. They spoke of a secret meeting, one Kale was hiding even from his own crew, a deal to trade her back to her promised groom for a price. Betrayal, just like everyone else. The next morning she confronted him, her voice sharp, her eyes blazing. Kale didn't deny it. "I'm not your savior," he said quietly. "I never was." But there was pain in his voice, deeper than she had expected. Subplots unfold. As the days passed, other truths surfaced. One of Kale's most trusted men was sending messages to Rafik, a betrayal within their own camp. Aaliya discovered too that her own family had planned to use her marriage, not just for peace, but to start a war they would secretly control. She was never meant to be a bride. She was meant to be a pawn. And Kale, he was never meant to care. The desert nights grew colder, so did their hearts. Aaliya fought the growing connection between them. It was wrong, foolish. She belonged to another. He was the man who took her away. But sometimes, when Kale wasn't looking, she caught herself, staring, wondering who he had been before the world hardened him. Kale, too, battled his own war. The closer they got to the border, the more he wanted to turn back, to rewrite the choices he had made. But how do you undo years of darkness? One night, everything changed. Rafik's men caught up to them. An ambush, beneath the cliffs, fire, blood, chaos. Kale's crew scattered like sand in the wind. In the middle of the battle, Aaliya faced a moment she never expected. She saved Kale's life. Her hands, once meant to be tied, now held a blade. Their eyes met through the smoke. No words were spoken, but everything had changed. By the time the sun rose again, half of Kale's men were gone. The road ahead was more dangerous than ever, but Aaliya was no longer a frightened girl waiting to be saved, and Kale was no longer the man who kidnapped her. They had become something else, something more dangerous than enemies, more fragile than lovers. They were two broken souls on a journey neither of them had chosen, but neither could escape, and the real storm was still waiting for them. The desert winds howled that night, carrying with them not just sand but secrets. They had stopped near an abandoned oasis, the last shelter before the border. The group was exhausted, broken, and bleeding from the last attack. The tension around the dying campfire was thick. No one spoke, but everyone was watching. Kale, watching Aaliya, but the real storm wasn't in the skies. It was sitting quietly beside them. Aaliya had noticed it earlier, the folded parchment Kale kept hidden inside his cloak. She hadn't thought much of it until she saw him reading it in the shadows, his face tight, his jaw clenched. When he stepped away into the darkness, she followed. She didn't expect to find him reading her death sentence. The letter wasn't from her family or from her promised groom. It was from Rafik, and it wasn't about ransom or revenge. It was a deal. Rafik had offered Kale everything he ever wanted: land, gold, a title, even safety from the bloodthirsty tribes, chasing them all in exchange for one thing: Aaliya, dead or alive. The impossible choice. Kale didn't know she had seen the letter. When he turned and found her standing there, his face turned to stone. You weren't supposed to know, he said quietly. Aaliya felt the ground beneath her vanish. How long, she asked. How long have you planned to trade me like cattle? Kale's silence was answer enough. She wanted to scream, to cry, but she had no tears left. Instead, she laughed, bitter, hollow. All this time, I thought I was your prisoner. I thought you were the enemy, but I never realized I was the bait. Kale reached for her arm, but she pulled away. You think I'm the villain, he said finally, voice low. Your family sent me to do this. Those words stopped her. My family, she repeated, the blood draining from her face. Kale nodded. You were never meant to marry. That marriage was a cover. They wanted Rafik dead. They wanted war. You were the weapon the world turns upside down. The truth fell on her like a hammer. All those years, the promises, the duty, the sacrifice, all of it, had been a lie. She wasn't a pawn in someone else's game. She was the game. Everything inside her, shattered. The loyalty to her family, the hatred toward Kale, the belief that her life had a clear purpose. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Kale stepped closer, voice softer now. I thought I was stealing you, but the truth is, they gave you away. Lines are drawn. The air between them shifted. For the first time, Aaliya wasn't the victim. She was the threat, and Kale wasn't her captor. He was her reflection, another soul used, betrayed, discarded. But before they could speak another word, a scream ripped through the night. An ambush Rafik's men. This time, they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to kill. The cliffhanger. Chaos erupted in the camp. Swords clashed. Flames roared. Horses screamed. Aaliya fought, not like a princess, but like a woman who had nothing left to lose. In the middle of the fight, Kale spotted Rafik. Their eyes locked across the battlefield. And then, before Kale could react, one of his own men, a man he trusted, turned his blade and drove it straight toward Aaliya. The screen fades to black on the moment the blade strikes. The night felt endless. The moment Kale saw the blade strike toward Aaliya, time slowed, but not enough. He lunged forward, slamming into the attacker, the sound of steel against flesh tearing the silence. Aaliya stumbled back, the knife grazing her arm but missing her heart. But that wasn't the end, not even close. No one left to trust. The ambush left half their camp in ruins. Fires burned, horses were stolen, and the few allies Kale still trusted were gone, dead, missing, or worse, bought off. As dawn cracked over the horizon, the survivors gathered, broken and bleeding. Kale's right-hand man Idris wasn't among them. Aaliya sat quietly near the smoldering ashes, binding her arm with a torn piece of cloth. Her eyes met Kale's. How many more will die because of me? She asked softly. Kale couldn't answer, because the truth was ugly. Everyone. For the next days, they rode without rest. The sands became their prison, burning sun by day, freezing winds by night. Rafik's men were always one step behind, hunting them like wolves. Kale and Aaliya had to cross enemy territories, sleep with knives under their pillows, and trust no one. The tension between them was unbearable, not because of hatred anymore, but because of something far more dangerous. Hope. Hope that maybe, against all odds, they could survive this. Hope that maybe, together, they were something more than pawns. That fragile hope shattered one night when they reached a rebel hideout. An old ally of Kale's, Soren, welcomed them in, gave them food, water, and shelter. But Soren had a price too. Aaliya woke in the middle of the night to the sound of hushed voices. She crept toward the shadows and heard it. Soren was negotiating with Rafik's men, Kale's own friend, the man who once swore an oath to protect him. Aaliya's heart twisted. She stormed back, shaking Kale awake. When she told him, she expected rage, fury, violence. Instead, Kale broke. He didn't speak. He just sat there, shoulders slumped, face hollow, like a man who had nothing left to lose. The sacrifice. They fled before dawn, but Rafik's army was already closing in. There was only one way out, the mountain pass. It was narrow, dangerous, and guarded by mercenaries. Aaliya argued. Kale didn't listen, because Kale had already decided. When they reached the pass, Kale handed her a map and his horse. You go alone, he said. They want me more than they want you. Aaliya's throat tightened. You'll die, he smiled faintly. Maybe, but you deserve a life after this. But she wasn't leaving. The final blow. Before they could act, arrows rained. Selling them out, they fought like demons, side by side. not as enemies, not as captor and captive, but as two souls fighting the world that betrayed them. They killed, they bled, they screamed, and then Idris appeared. But he wasn't here to save them. He stood beside Rafik. Kale's most trusted friend had switched sides. Aaliya looked at Kale. The man who had already lost everything had just lost one more thing. Heartbreak in the dust. Idris called across the battlefield. "Give her to us. Kale, you can still walk away." But Kale wasn't listening, because Aaliya had drawn her dagger, not to fight, but to give herself up. She stepped forward, ready to surrender, ready to end this nightmare. Kale grabbed her wrist, his voice breaking. "You are not a sacrifice." Tears filled her eyes. "Neither are you." The battle raged around them, but in that moment, nothing else existed. Together or nothing. They ran, not away from the fight, but toward it, straight into Rafik's camp. The only chance left was madness to end it here and now. Kale knew it was a suicide mission. Aaliya knew it too. But there were no more cards left to play, no more friends to trust, no more dreams to cling to, only each other. Lead into final confrontation. As they charged forward, the screen fades to black, and the narrator's voice echoes, "When you lose everything, sometimes the only thing left to do is burn the whole world down." The dust cloud swallowed them whole, as Kale and Aaliya stormed toward Rafik's stronghold. The night was split by fire and steel. Screams echoed. Steel clashed against steel, and somewhere in the middle of it all, fate waited. They fought like shadows in the darkness, slipping past guards, dodging arrows. Kale's sword dripped with blood, not of enemies, but of old friends who had sold their loyalty. As they neared the heart of the camp, Idris stepped out, blocking their path. His face was calm, almost apologetic. The man who once laughed beside Kale, who once swore to stand with him until death, now stood against him. "Idris, move," Kale growled, voice rough like gravel. "You don't understand," Idris said quietly. "You were never meant to win this fight. We were never meant to survive this world." Behind Idris, Rafik's soldiers circled like wolves. Aaliya grabbed Kale's arm. "We're surrounded." Idris' gaze flicked to Aaliya. "Give her to us. You don't have to die tonight." But Kale's eyes stayed locked on Idris. "You already killed me the night you betrayed me. The ultimate choice." Rafik stepped forward at last, tall, cold, untouchable. His voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Hand her over, Kale. You can have everything you ever wanted. Power, land, peace." Aaliya's breath caught in her throat, because for a split second, Kale hesitated, not because he wanted power, but because, for the first time, he saw what it would cost to keep fighting. Everything. The weight of death, betrayal, and loss pressed on his shoulders like iron. And then Aaliya spoke. "Let me go, Kale." Her voice was soft, almost breaking. "End this, Kale's demon." But this wasn't about her anymore. It was about Kale. For years, he had been a weapon, a pawn, a soldier without a soul. And here he was, staring at the people who had carved the monster inside him. He let go of her arm, but not to surrender. He stepped forward toward Rafik. "No more deals," Kale said. "No more blood for your games." Rafik smiled coldly. "Then you choose death, the sacrifice." The fight exploded. Kale lunged toward Rafik, slicing through soldiers like a storm. Aaliya fought beside him, every movement desperate, brutal, unforgiving. But they were outnumbered. A blade cut across Kale's shoulder. Another sliced Aaliya's leg. Idris lunged at Kale, sword raised. Kale turned. Too late. Aaliya threw herself in front of him. Steel pierced her side. The sound of Kale's scream tore through the battlefield. Aaliya fell to her knees, blood blooming across her dress. "You fool," she whispered, voice trembling. Kale caught her, cradling her like something fragile. Her breath was shallow. "I told you," she said. "You deserve a life." The final blow. Rage consumed Kale. He rose, sword dripping red, and charged. One by one, Rafik's men fell. Idris tried to block him, but Kale disarmed him in seconds, blade pressed to his throat. For a heartbeat, Kale hesitated. Old memories, old laughter. Idris met his eyes. "Do it." Kale dropped his sword. "I'm done killing the people I once called brothers." He turned and came face to face with Rafik. No more armies, no more pawns, just two men, one last fight. Everything ends here. Their swords clashed under the burning sky. Rafik fought like a man who had never lost, truthless, calculated, vicious. Cale fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Each strike was personal. Each blow carried years of betrayal, grief, and rage. Finally, Cale's blade drove deep into Rafiq's chest. The tyrant's eyes widened. He staggered, fell, and it was over. The silence after the storm. Cale stood there, chest heaving, blood on his hands. The battlefield fell quiet. The enemy scattered. The war was over. But Cale wasn't looking at the fallen bodies. He was looking at Aaliya, where she lay on the cold ground, her breath faint. One last confession. Cale dropped to his knees beside her. Her eyes fluttered open. "You're free," he whispered, voice shaking. A weak smile touched her lips. "I never wanted freedom," she said. "I wanted you." Tears slipped down Cale's face. He took her hand, pressing it to his chest. "You were promised to another," he said, "but your heart always belonged here." Her fingers curled weakly around his, and then, with a soft breath, her eyes closed. The scene ends on Cale, broken, bloody, victorious, but holding nothing except memories. The narrator's voice returns. "When everything is stripped away, all that remains is the truth of who you fought for."